We're going to be talking about a lot of cool and sassy things. So, title of my talk today, Cheap Sass Tricks to Amaze and Impress Your Friends. A lot of what I want to talk about is Sass evangelism and sort of like state of the community, how we're doing on this. First off, just to introduce myself, I'm John Long. I work for a company called User Voice. We created the help and feedback tab that you see on a lot of sites. We're responsible for that. We do basically feedback and support. If you're running a web service and you want to collect feedback about it, you want to have a help desk, a knowledge base, that kind of stuff, we provide all of that. So I also write a good bit on the Sass way. And we're probably the primary Sass blog. And basically, our vision is just to collect useful tips, tricks, tutorials on how to get started in Sass, how to do cool stuff with us. And we want people to write for us. So if you are interested in writing about Sass and you write well, get in touch. You can also follow us on Twitter, just at the Sass way. So we started this 2 or 3 years ago, I guess, and really want it to be a resource for the Sass community. So, Sass. Can you believe it started all in 2006? That's like ancient history. So it started off sort of with Hamel. In June of 2006, Hamel was born. That was the first commit. By November, I think, for some reason, Hampton has a habit of committing things at the end of the month. I'm not sure what's going on at the beginning of the month, but this was like November 31st, the first commit on Sass back in 2006. I think we had Nathan joining in like the very next day or very, very shortly in December there. And it was really a collaboration, from what I understand, between the two of them. And I think Nathan ended up doing more of the work, or at least eventually. So 2 years later, Chris Epstein starts working on Compass, and it's sort of become the standard lib of Sass. It's probably one of the best reasons to be using Sass. So if you're not using it, you should really, really get on board. All kinds of great stuff in there. Mix-ins for CSS3 and just doing a lot of common things. A good reset, all that. By 2008, Chris had joined up with Team Sass. He became a core member. Going forward a couple of years, 2009, we got Sass 2.2. 2010, Sass 3 is released. Also that summer, a friendly little guy named the Sass Watch was born. And this was just recognizing that there was a need for sort of a way of announcing Sass news and stuff like that. I started this Twitter account, the Sass Watch, and it later became the Sass Way. Then in April, Sass 3.1 was released, and this was sort of the first release that didn't have Hamel involved in it, so it became kind of its own thing. In 2011, Rails 3 adopted it. If you're not a Rails user, Rails has just been very influential in the industry in terms of like pushing great stuff or recommendations on great libraries and things, and that was pretty significant for us. Sass Meetup Seattle was started, and their Twitter account's a pretty awesome one to follow. Constantly posting cool stuff about Sass. 2012, Hampton created the C version of Sass, libsass. Also in 2012, we had our first episode of Sasscast. Anybody listening to Sasscast? Yeah, a couple of people. Some good stuff there. Dale is doing a good job on that. And now here we are in 2013. What is this? 7 years? 6 years? 7 years later? Conf. Give yourselves a hand. You're at the first conference about Sass. It's taken us 7 years. We've come a long way. So, backing up just a little bit, where have we been? It's interesting how hard it has been to get people to use something that will make your life better, kind of thing. And this is a quote, Harry Roberts. If you're following CSS Wizardry, he's a great guy when it comes to just great advice on CSS. But this is him back in January 2010. He had sort of a collection of tips and tricks, and I came across this. And he says, there are several tools and frameworks out there at the moment which extend CSS to adopt a more programmatic syntax and function. It is my opinion that these are only really of benefit to people who haven't yet mastered writing CSS properly. If you learn how to write your CSS sensibly, you'll see little, if anything, if any need for things like Sass. He kind of spelled that wrong. And when I read this, I was like, oh, this is mastering CSS, writing it properly? What is he talking about? So I wrote this article. It ended up on Hacker News. Tons of people saw it. The demise of plain CSS, why Sass and languages like it will triumph. And it was just sort of a response to what Harry had written. And so as I was preparing this talk, I went back and just wanted to see, what were people saying back in 2011, 4 years ago, about Sass. This is one really amusing comment. He's talking about mixins. And why in the world do you need mixins? I mean, you have snippets in your code editor, and he's using Dreamweaver. He also chastised me for not using a modern editor. Snippets in Dreamweaver. Okay. Another guy here. He says, the hallmark of a useful library or tool is that it solves a problem. And he says the issue is, after reading your article, there's no problem to solve. He says, with using CSS rules with inheritance, you don't need it, kind of thing. I think what he's talking about is creating a class for everything you want to share between things and putting that on your markup, which is a very useful technique, but not wanting mix-ins. I'm certainly glad I don't have to put rounded corners on every div I want to have round. So here's another one on painful CSS. The biggest pain is standards compliance between browsers. That's the big pain in CSS. To which Sass is completely unrelated, ? This is the primary function all those CSS3 mix-ins solve, is that standards compliance between browsers. He says, Sass provides nothing but a complicated handhold for beginners. More programmatic-like. Why couldn't they just stick to a standard set of syntax rules? At the time, Sass had our variables began with exclamation points, and we didn't have the SCSS stuff, and there was a lot of stuff in the syntax of Sass when I was writing this article that sort of got cleaned up once Sass 3 came along. So this is where we were back in 2011. Where are we now? What's going on in the Sass world? So we've got a bunch of Sass books that are coming out even this year, or have been out for a little while. We've got Hampton's book on Sass. We've got another one, Netherland, Nathan, Chris, Brandon Mathis, they all contributed to Sass and Compass in Action. I saw this at the book table upstairs. So that one's out. Another one came out this summer. This is an ebook but a nice little introduction to Sass and Compass. Dan Cederholm written a lot of really cool stuff. Simple Bits, he did that blog for a long time. Sort of one of those web standards gods, if you will. Has gotten into Sass, and he really loves it. And then we've got one more. Dale is writing a book on Sass in Depth. So we got some cool stuff going on as far as books now. I already mentioned Dan Cederholm. He's writing Sass for web designers. Dan's also famous. He did Dribble. And so we have a lot to thank him for. Chris Coyers, another guy using Sass. It's been great to see him get into it. He loved it so much, he's created this thing called CodePen, which has been amazing for just sharing cool stuff that we're doing on the web. Another person that's gotten into it, Nicole Sullivan. She's the object-oriented CSS lady. Some really cool stuff that she has to say about writing good CSS. She's now writing Sass. In fact, I think the object-oriented CSS repo has Sass in it. Yeah. Another guy, Nathan Smith, he's a longtime Sass user at this stage. He wrote the 960 grid system, which a lot of us have used in the past. One of the original first sort of frameworks in CSS. And he's now gone on, he's written something else, Unsemantic, which is a Sass project for grids in Sass. And one more person here I want to mention that's using Sass. She's not here today, but she's awesome. She's local to North Carolina, and she has done a ton of talks on animation and Sass, and has been really hitting the conference circuit. Amazing person. Sad she can't be here. She ended up getting sick, I think. Harry Roberts, whose quote inspired my article, has turned around, and he's starting to release stuff in Sass as well. And he's had a complete reversal in his opinion on how to use it. So cool stuff there. Another guy, this is Andrew Clark, and I think he's actually a less guy now. But this is what he had said about it. If your CSS is complicated enough to need a compiler or preprocessor, you're doing it wrong. Well, here he is this year. I once wrote that there was no need to use CSS processors like less or Sass. I was wrong. Very sorry. Yes, you were, Andrew Clark. So, and what's interesting, too, if you look at the book here, you'll see that he wrote the foreword to Sass and Compass for designers. So he's had a change of heart. I guess the point of this is that Sass evangelism is easier than it has ever been. I really think we've hit the tipping point. Now Sass is really looked at as sort of a cool technology that a lot of people that we respect are using. And if you're not doing it, you probably want to, or you want to learn more about it. So we've done some cool things. What's worked well? So probably the thing I want to sort of highlight more than anything else is, I think one of the things that's awesome about the Sass community is that we work on cool stuff. We do it together. We do it out in the open. And just showing off like what we're working on has probably done more for us than anything else. We've also been building frameworks in Sass now. Certainly have Compass. We've got Bourbon. There's the Zerb Foundation project, which is kind of Twitter Bootstrap style, but it's written completely in Sass. We've done a lot of blog posts, articles. Folks have been going out speaking at events. And in general, I'd say that the Sass community is very friendly to newbies. Particularly when you compare us to the less community, we've got more blogging going on. We've got more of a community that people can come in, pick up, start learning stuff. So what's not worked well? Probably two things. Hounding people on Twitter. We got a lot of early feedback from folks that man, these Sass people are just so passionate, and they feel like everybody has to be using Sass. So they probably should be, right? Picking fights with the less folks. We've certainly done our share of that sort of stuff, and we really need to stop that. It's not helping our community. It's not making us look friendly to other people. So, moving on. And in the spirit of show, don't tell, just real quickly here, I wanted to share why I love Sass. So I was thinking about this, and Sass has a lot of different features that are pretty awesome. But probably my number one reason is it makes it so much easier to organize all the things, right? Just being able to break your project up into multiple files. It makes it so much easier to keep stuff where it should be and organized. And so that's probably my favorite feature of Sass. Probably my second favorite thing is all these awesome CSS3 mix-ins, which we aren't going to need in the future, but they're still pretty handy while CSS3 is young. So that's number two. Third reason, BYOF. You can build your own framework. When you look at frameworks like the 960 grid system, there was only so much that it could provide, because all it had was class names that you could tack onto stuff. But now with Sass, we've got variables and mix-ins and ways of customizing systems and really building extensible stuff. So that's one of my favorite things about it. And then reason number 4, got to bring in a little anchor man. Sass peeps are amazing. The people in the community, particularly Chris Epstein, and what he's done with Compass, working tirelessly on stuff. And then Nathan, making Sass awesome. We're really fortunate in the Sass community. So a couple of my favorite things, and these are just little things that you may not, or you probably know about. I love that I can write RGB stuff this way. So making transparent colors. If you were to write this in normal CSS, of course, you'd have to have all 3 parts of the value there, in addition to the alpha part of it. But that makes it so much easier, just a little thing in Sass. Color manipulation, just being able to adjust colors on the fly, amazing. This makes it so much easier to design stuff in the browser. How many people have ever used color math in Sass? Have you used color math? So you can actually do things like add 111 to a color to make it brighter, which is kind of weird. That's what we started out with Sass, but now you can do stuff like lighten and adjust color and all kinds of things like that. Double ampersand is another one of my favorite things. Does anybody know about this? So, of course, you've got the ampersand operator that's going to repeat the class name. But I love using this within the context of a button. So when I have 2 buttons next to each other, put a margin left on them. This works really, really well when you don't have a lot of nesting. Now, of course, if you have nesting, then it's going to repeat, and that's not what you want it to say. You can only do this on one level of nesting. But super handy, double ampersand. I like that. I've already mentioned mixins, and of course, placeholder classes. These are new. Anybody using placeholder classes yet? All right. That's awesome. All right. So let's look at some cool, sort of crazy Sass demos. And these really are crazy. If you're writing CSS this way, or your Sass this way, you're probably doing it wrong. Because the stuff I'm going to be showing you is going to generate thousands of lines of CSS. But it's really cool, too. All right, cheap Sass tricks. So for my first trick, this is the dancing banana. This is a CSS demo that somebody put on CodePen a while back. And what's amazing about it is you look at the CSS and you can't read any of it because it's just 1,000 lines of dancing banana. And this is all done with box shadows. So they're doing tons of box shadows for each frame of animation. It's pretty cool. So let's look at some code. So this is dancing bananas in Sass. And I've got a couple of variables that I'm setting up here, the colors that I'm using to begin with. Turns out there were only, 7 colors in it. So I gave them some nice shorthand names so that I could use them easily. And I've got the pixel size set to 18 pix so that it's really big, and you guys can see it. And then I have this array, or a list, and I have lists within lists. Lists within lists. So this is the first frame here of the dancing banana. To make this a little easier, here we go. So you can see the dancing banana there. And basically what's going on is that I've got all these color values. These are the transparent ones here. And then the black pixels I've highlighted, and you've got the dark pixels and all of that. Dark yellow. And it's got a couple of frames here. And then the meat of the work is actually done down here. Let me see if I can get the font bigger. Can you guys see that? In the back. You guys seeing that yet? Is that big enough? Bigger? Good? Okay, so basically what I've done is I've written a small function here that takes the frame and it turns it into a bunch of shadows. And that function is then called down here in the keyframes themselves as I cycle through each one of the frames and set up a box shadow for each one of the frames. So pretty cool stuff. Very simple technology-wise, and Sass makes it a ton easier. This was several thousand lines of CSS code, and now we've got it in a format where we can actually edit it, which is pretty cool. I have a feeling that he generated the CSS that he used using some sort of graphics program to analyze it kind of thing or something. But you could actually compose a new image, a new set of images in Sass, which is awesome. Now again, this generates so many lines of CSS that you would never want to use this in a project. But it's cool that Sass gives you the ability to do it. Dancing banana, my first trick. So this next trick comes to you from Mason Wendell. Is Mason here? Okay. He's done some writing for us. He's known as the coding designer on Twitter. And he wrote an article for us on the Sass way called Mother Effing Text Shadows. And this is one of the demos that he did. And he's using this thing called the Lorentz attractor, which I really know nothing about. But what's cool about it, let's see here. Lorentz. It's just a little bit of math. Just a little math. That's a joke. And basically what he's doing is using this mathematical formula for throwing a bunch of shadows out in a crazy cool pattern. And he's generating, so here's the asterisk, text shadow, and he just calls his little function there, and that generates all those shadows. I would explain this if I knew how, but that's the trick. So this one is the Lorentz attractor. Pretty cool stuff. There's an article on the Sass way about this if you want to learn more. So my next trick, CSS spinners. There's all kinds of cool stuff in CSS 3 now that we're able to take advantage of as far as like animation and stuff like that. So at the beginning of the summer, I started working on a project, and I've used GIFs for spinners. I've used JavaScript to like generate the spinners for me. And all of these solutions just kind of feel hacky, and they have problems. So GIF spinners, for instance, don't handle transparency very well. You end up with weird stuff with them. So I've started working on a project called CSS spinners, which basically takes minimal markup. Let me open up this guy. Oh. There we go. So minimal markup here. So in this case, just a single span, and turns it into an animated rotating spinner. So this one, it's funny. A lot of the stuff I'm going to be showing today does a lot with box shadows. So this one is, let's see. I guess we've got some of the screen that's covered up there. Let me try this. There we go. So we start off. Oh, this is the wrong one. Spin CSS. This one. That's right. Okay. So this one here, similar concept, but I'm just using the spinner color, creating, what is this? 8 different box shadows at different angles. And then I include a little animation here that tells it to rotate on the z-axis. So pretty simple concept here, but cool results. Ooh. So there's an animated rotating spinner. So this is one of my, I think this was my first one in the project. Very, very simple. But I thought, like, what else can you do? So this one's kind of a fun one. It's one of my favorites. It's something about the color and the fact that the more you stare at it, the harder it is to look away. Okay, I don't have anything else to share. We're just going to... So this one here, CSS, is this right? Yeah. And he's got very similar markup. just a single class. And he's using basically the same technique, creating a couple of box shadows. And then for each frame, he's changing his position of the box shadows themselves. And it takes a lot of tweaking to get something like this to work right. But once you get it, it's pretty amazing. CSS animation is a lot of fun. Oh, I'll point out one more thing. This is a fun little trick I discovered while working on this that basically hides the rules from IE9 and below. So the loading will display if you're on IE9 or below. And if you're above, you'll get something cool and animated, which seems appropriate, IE9. If you're using that browser, you don't need to have awesomeness. So this one was fun. This one's kind of crazy cool. So the challenge here was trying to figure out how to achieve this without more markup, right? So what's going on here is we're using the before and after. Let's see here. Plus. Oh, plus. Oop. All right, so I've got a couple of different keyframe sequences here. I've got one for the thing that's on top and rotating, so I call that plus top. Let's see here. Keyframes. Oh, this is the CSS. Let me get the Sass here. Plus SCSS. There we go. All right. So this is the plus top one. We've got a bottom area, and then we've got a background. So there's 3 parts to this animation. And if you look at the code, basically what's going on is we have the after is on top. And he is basically a rectangle that is doing the folding in the plus animation. So he's this guy that's folding over. And he's got a border radius on him so that he's, looks like a circle or part of a circle. And for each stage in the animation, he's rotating on his y-axis and all of that. So that's sort of the first part of it. The next thing that happens is that we've got to have another color. So if you notice, when this is folding, you've got one color on one side and one color on another. So we use the before class to create another semicircle on one side that's the other color. Okay? And then there's a background, which is the whole circle, that contains the primary color that something's on. And what's going on is that after the end of every fold, it rotates and then goes back the other direction, is the way this one works. And then it rotates again and goes back the other direction. So we're going Y, and that creates that folding paper thing, which is pretty awesome. So this one's another pretty fun one. How many people have played Letterpress? Pretty awesome little word game. And this animated spinner was from there. I'm not going to go into how this works. It's pretty self-explanatory, but another good example of using box shadows, again, for CSS animation. This one's fun, too. Sort of an animated bouncing ball. And this is using a very similar technique. The ball itself is our object, if I remember right. Then before and after classes are used for the highlight and the shadow itself as it goes back and forth. And that gets pretty crazy on the animating side of things, but the effect's pretty awesome. So all of those things are in a project that you can get to today at cssspinners.com. And there's a lot more of those guys to have fun with. By the way, if you're looking to just have some fun with CSS animation and get down and dirty with Sass, making CSS spinners is an awesome, fun thing to do. And I would love to have your work contributed to this project if there are other spinners or things that you guys come up with. So if you're looking for a project for the weekend, just have a little fun, try and create a CSS spinner. Okay, so my next trick, the Sass radar. How many people have seen this already? Aha. And we know the ones that follow me on Twitter. So this is pretty cool as well, and this is somewhere around I want to say 30,000 lines of generated CSS. In fact, it was so big that the version that I put on CodePen had to be trimmed down so that CodePen could compile it because it times out after a certain period of time. So some things that Sass lets you do pretty much just are not possible in CSS because you would not want to write that by hand. Let's look at this guy, radar. Okay. So look at the markup real quick. Basically, we've got a list here with a bunch of empty elements. I know this isn't very semantic, but it works for my purposes. Basically, each one of those elements is part of the trail that you're seeing there. So you've got 10 different things, and they vary in transparency. And each one of them is rotating on that axis there. So we've got 10 of them. And that's the basic markup for it. And each one of those makes up a kind of, what happened? A kind of frame here. Here we are. So if I highlight the ones in here, you'll see that there's a hidden message that's there. And what I'm doing is, for each arm, I go through and I read the ones and zeros for the frame, essentially, or the position that it's on. And I do that and go across as I'm rotating, and that creates the Sass Conf that you're seeing in the demo there. Pretty cool stuff, huh? Yeah, don't do this with CSS. Okay, so I started playing around with the green on black, and I was like, that's crazy cool. It's feeling very techy and all of that. What else could I do with that? And I thought, what's green and cool and black? And I thought, let's do the matrix. So this is me doing the matrix in Sass. There's no JavaScript being used here, which is pretty cool. Yes. So what the hell is going on? Let's look at that. I've got a little slide here. Okay, so each one of those columns that you're seeing there is a row of randomly generated characters, okay? And then on top of it, we have basically another object that has the highlighted character that we're looking at, and it has a background on it that has a sort of a transparency effect going on. And it happens that the background turns totally black under the character, and then what's up above is shown. So like in this case, you would only see the top 3 characters of that little matrix line. And that gives you, does that make sense? So then I just animate that down, essentially. And as it moves down, the transparency background moves with it. So if I was to come back here, let's pull up the matrix. You guys are going to actually see the code of the matrix. How cool is this? All right. So if I just come in here real quick, and I'm going to turn off this guy for a second, and reboot the matrix. Oh, gosh. All right, so you see I have a bunch of columns of text, basically, right? And by moving this top area here down as I go and shifting the background for it, that's basically how I'm able to create that animated effect. So let's look at some other cool stuff that's in here. How am I doing on time? We're good? 1 minute. 1 minute. All right. So one of the things that I really want in Sass, having worked on this last night, I was telling Chris this, we really need a random function. There's a library that I was able to use for this, but unfortunately I can't put it up on Code. Well, actually, CodePen does have random. Maybe I'll look at that. If it'll compile, it generates a ton of Sass as well. So basically what's going on here, we've got a string of random characters. And let me show you the markup real quick. Matrix, HTML. And these are the columns, the LIs here. There's a bunch of them. And we generate random columns of text, basically, with the CSS. And then we've got some of the animating going on. Wish I could go through this, but you can dig into it yourself. It is all up on my GitHub. GitHub JLong is my name. Cheap Sass tricks. So let me wrap this up. Challenges for Sass, things that we need help on. I'm just going to throw out a couple of things that I haven't discussed this with anybody, but these are just sort of things that I'm seeing, doing a lot of writing about Sass, looking at some of what Les is doing. One of the things that I think we really need someone to step up and do is a Sass.js. Getting Sass in the browser in this way would make it a whole lot easier to build tools like CodePen. CodePen right now has to send a request out to the server and all of that kind of stuff, whereas if it could compile it in the browser, never-ending story, it would be awesome. So another thing, Chris, is this coming? Yeah. Yeah. All right, so we need keyframe animation for Compass. Having to hack on that myself to get my demos to work. Bourbon already has this, but Compass is going to get it. Ours will be better. Ours will be better, yes. So we need better docs for Sass. Some of this is coming in the pipe with the new Sass website. What is the status of that? Soon. It has been soon for a long time. All right, so we need better docs. We need folks blogging about Sass, articles, people writing books. There's a lot of books that can be written about Sass. We're just scratching the surface here. Launching cool projects. Going out there on your own, like Kickass did, and doing cool stuff. One of the things that I've loved as I've worked on this presentation, is just posting the stuff I'm doing on CodePen. And those things get a lot of hits. I think they do go a long way just in terms of helping people get started with Sass or want to get started with Sass. So the final thing I want to say is stay classy. Or sassy, however you want to put it. Just as a community, just remaining friendly, getting people on board, keeping Sass awesome. And that's it.